Hey, I am Mike Squires, and this is the Couchers Podcast with episode number 109, and my guest, John Oates. I was so excited to speak with John Oates. I was just on the verge of finishing his autobiography when we spoke, which put me in the right place to speak with him and gave me a lot of, I think, good perspective on, just whatever things you just don't even realize as a MTV viewer, teenager in the 80s. And what a cool guy. Yeah, I feel like I could hang with John Oates. There are a lot of people that I admire that I'm just like, I wouldn't want to hang, but I bet John Oates is a fucking hell of a hang. Um, and just a humble guy, seems to take himself serious enough that he knows he respects his art and craft, but doesn't take himself so seriously that he wouldn't spend the 90s learning how to fix fences and drive tractors. And that's amazing. And me coming from where I'm coming from, that is super admirable. I think it's great. So he has a live album coming out this week, September 18th. It comes out with John Oates and the Good Road Band. This was recorded live at the Station Inn, and you guys have heard me talk about the Station Inn. The Station Inn is in Nashville. It's a real hole in the wall. When I first went there, the whole neighborhood was a hole. But this is great. I've heard a couple tracks. He's got a dynamite band, and I think he said it was recorded back in January. And wasn't wasn't even a plan necessarily to release it this soon, but it's happening. So 2020 has a way of helping you change your mind about how things are going to go, doesn't it? Go check that out. Stream it, buy it, listen to it, because it's good. You like good music, right? And also, John is the best. Damn it. I've got to hang with this guy. All right. So if you are enjoying the Couchers podcast, which I guess if you're listening to my 8-minute intros, you must be. I don't know if I would tolerate me, but thank you for doing it. If you are enjoying the Couchers podcast, first of all, thank you so much for listening. Second of all, I could use your help because every episode I ask you for your help. I ask you to share episodes on your social media pages. I ask you to buy t-shirts and trucker hats. I ask you to leave reviews and ratings. And I ask you to potentially become a monthly pledge supporter. And you can do it for 99 cents a month over at anchor.fm/couch-riffs. Or just go to anchor.fm and type in Couch Riffs. Or there's a link right in this episode where you're listening. That's probably the straightest line between 2 points. What I want to do right now is I want to thank all the folks who have been supporting the podcast. So I'll do this as quickly as possible. Thank you, Ryan Waters. Thank you, Hayden Smith. Thank you, Ryan Hooper. Thank you, Jamie McParland. Thank you, Matt Gabbs. Thank you, Justin Jones. Thank you, Doug Starkovic. Thank you, Deja Colantuono. Thank you, Adam Pranica. Thank you, Dan Hurst. Thank you, James Pope. Thank you, S.J. Somerset Sullivan. Thank you, Mike Lacerda. Thank you, Dan Leary. Thank you, Kathy Giordano. Thank you, Rebecca Pellman. Thank you, Danny Bland. Thank you, Ryan Crace. Thank you, Teresa Morgan. Thank you, Perry Morgan. Thank you, Rolla Amplifiers. Go check out that Bob Balch model. Thank you, Paul Hutzler. Thank you, Justice Gash. Thank you, Steve Hall. And thank you so much to River City Guitars. River City Guitars are my friends and huge supporters of the podcast. And listen, if you have some guitars to sell, get a hold of River City Guitars. Every day is a buying day over there. You know what I'm saying? Every day they are bringing in the haul like fishermen. You can get a hold of them at 509-818-7693, rivercityguitars.com, or send them an email at sales.rivercityguitars@gmail.com. What these guys specialize in is vintage, used, and generally cool stuff. Don't come at them with some booty ass stuff. But what do I know? I'm old and in the way. I don't even know what's cool anymore. Maybe I guess building season's just about behind us, but maybe you want to build a new deck and you got an extra guitar laying around. You sell that thing and build your deck. You're not working a lot right now, right? So get a hold of him. My boy Bobby is the best. Now, every week I pick an instrument off of the website as my pick of the week. This week I choose an appropriate guitar as a beautiful sort of westerny, mid-century modern. This is a 1959 National Glenwood in natural blonde. It has a hard case. Is it the original hard case? I don't know. But it is 100% original. These things are this is when, there are a few builders that are still doing things with this level of detail. But this is like the golden age of beautiful guitar building, right? The inlays are incredible. The pick guards are thoughtfully shaped and very decorative. It's not just like a scratch plate. And this thing's got more knobs. I got to keep it clean here. This thing's got a lot of knobs. I don't know what they do, but this thing is incredible. Go look at it. rivercityguitars.com. This is at a 59 National Glenwood. You can have this guitar for $34.99 or make them an offer. No harm in making an offer, right? All they can say is, how about this? Or no. Believe me, I hear no a lot. It's okay. You hear it and then you're fine afterwards. So go check out rivercityguitars.com. I'm going to get into the conversation right now with John. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. I hope that you enjoy it as well. I think no matter where you sit in the world or in your belief set, 2020 has been a really difficult time. Unless you've got the thickest skin ever. I don't know what you're made of. But just remember the golden rule. Just treat people the way you want to be treated, And don't be a dick. It is so much harder to not be a dick than it is to be, wait a minute. It's so much harder to be a dick than to not be a dick. That's it. Just don't be a dick. Okay? Thank you.
Hello.
Hey, how you doing, man?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I love your choice of background.
That's the sunset of my house in Colorado.
Is it really?
Yeah, for real.
Technology, I love it.
I'm here. My head's disappearing though in the weird background. Is that too distracting? You want me to get rid of it?
No, it's great. It reminds it when your head starts to slightly disappear. Reminds me of my late teens experimentation.
Yeah, either that, or I feel like the weather girl on the local news. I see you got quite a guitar collection there, huh?
Oh yeah, I finally we moved up here. I live just outside of Hudson, New York.
Oh, okay.
And we moved up here almost 2 years ago. Just this summer, I finally set my little room up here to do
good
music stuff in. So yeah, it's great.
Yeah, cool, man.
This is some of them.
Right.
My wife will kill me if I show up with it. Like when I have a new guitar on the way, I say, "Hey, just keep the case, will you please?" I don't even want it. I'm running out.
I got a basement full of cases too.
Yeah, that's the problem. They say you can never have too many guitars, but you can definitely have too many cases.
Well, let me know if you ever run out of cases. I got a few for you too.
Oh yeah, thanks. I remember the day I got rid of my last road case was a glorious day. It was like getting rid of a boat.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got some old acoustic guitar airline cases. They're so freaking heavy. I remember I couldn't barely carry them through the airport. They protected the guitar, but man, it killed my shoulders.
Do you when you guys do fly-ins? I mean, no one's doing jack crap this year, of course, but
Well, when I did tours with the Good Road Band with my Nashville band, we would take Southwest, or we jump in a van, or rent a cars. It was pretty down and dirty.
yeah. Were you doing carry-ons? Are you doing the gig bag thing?
Well, it depends. I ended up finding a kind of a nice airline case, but it was much lighter. And I always would just hedge my bet just in case they took it away from me.
Right.
So, but a lot, I know Guthrie Trapp, my guitar player, he'd bring his stuff in a gig bag. And, Southwest was actually really good. We'd fly them because they never hassled us on guitars.
Yeah. We had a whole routine worked out. Me and one of my bandmates, he's a very, very pretty guy. And he would go down first and just like, go down the walk first and sweet talk to the staff.
The flight attendant.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. And it worked out a lot. It worked very well
good.
for us. You're in Nashville now, yeah?
Yeah. Yep.
How's I mean, you've been there for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I've been listening to your audiobook and
Yeah.
I'm almost done. So I think that everything works out for you because here you are in front of me.
You must have had the Tommy Mottola chapter in
I'm
mind.
past there. Yeah, I'm past there. And I'm like chapter 72. I mean, I'm in the home stretch.
Yeah. Well, my co-collaborator Chris Epting voiced that audiobook. I did the introduction and he voiced it. I couldn't do the whole thing, so he did it. Hey, it worked out pretty well. I'm still here, still making music. I'm still fairly healthy. Got a 24-year-old son, and I've been married for 25 years. And hey, can't ask for much more than that.
And you've had an amazing career, man.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying it's kind of true.
I mean, I imagine if I were you and I looked back on the things that I've done, I would love to hear myself tell myself stories.
That's why I'm here to tell you my stories.
I love it. Are there
Yeah.
moments when you think back on the experience of your life and you think that it almost feels like like you watched it on television, like it wasn't?
Yeah, it's one of the things that really strikes me about all the various adventures and accomplishments and setbacks is that, and this kind of came to the front too, not only in writing the book, but when Daryl and I did our box set about, I guess it was like 2007 or something like that. I was kind of blown away by the amount of music that we made and how we made an album every year and toured every year from 1972 until 1986. And sometimes we had more than one album because we had a live album or a compilation or whatever. So it was kind of shocking to think that we were able to write those songs, go in the studio and record them, go on tour, come back, write, record, and it really never stopped. It never stopped for 20 years, almost 20 years. That blew me away. And then I squeezed in racing cars and flying airplanes and doing all this other stuff that I did. I still don't know how I did that. When I was racing cars, I remember I'd leave the studio on Thursday night and I'd fly to like Milwaukee or Columbus, and I'd get a rent-a-car and go to the track. I'd race on Friday and Saturday and Sunday. Sunday night, I'd fly back to New York, and on Monday morning, I was back in the studio. It was crazy. It's just, it is kind of, it blows me away how I crammed all this stuff into one lifetime.
What a bunch of incredible opportunities that you were able to, kick those doors open because of the success you were seeing,
Yeah, a lot of, listen, I'm very blessed, and I don't take it for granted. I'm very, very well aware that the success of Hall & Oates has enabled me to do a lot of things, a lot of personal, dreams outside of music, but also make this music that I'm making now in Nashville. It's really provided a platform for me to have real, true artistic freedom, which I think a lot of people, it's their ultimate goal in a way. And I've, in a sense, I've achieved that. And I'm very, very cognizant of that. And I don't take it for granted. And I think it's probably why I work so hard, because I want to make the most of this unique opportunity that I have.
I feel like the tone of everything you just said comes through in your book, and you don't. I mean, because you always wonder, like, oh, is this person is a successful? They have had a successful career, sold a lot of records. They've been all over TV. They've done everything. They've done the dream, right?
Yeah.
Are they going to be a prick? And you totally aren't a prick. It's so awesome.
Don't worry. The interview's not quite over yet. We'll get to that part.
Great. Also, I wanted to point out there are a few things. I've talked about the Station Inn a few times on the podcast because my first ever trip to Nashville, it was recommended to me, and this was in 1999 or 2000, and the Station Inn at that time was a very much a different place. It was like a sawdust floor and plywood walls, and there was a jam room, tiny crappy jam room in the very back, and then that
it's still the same.
Is that right?
Yes.
I mean,
it's still the same.
It's the last time I was in Nashville, I went down looking for it, and I didn't even recognize the neighborhood,
Well, the neighborhood has gone through a crazy transformation, but there it sits in its little concrete blockhouse, of it, really not much has changed,
It's I mean, I was very impressed with it. Well, the musicians that were playing there that night were clearly, world-class musicians. And so
every night
it's a really magical place. And so I think it's really cool that you chose that place to record your live record.
Well, I chose it for a number of reasons. One is that when I first got together with the core of the band, Guthrie Trapp, Steve Mackey, and Josh Day, the basic rhythm section, and even Sam Bush, the first time we played together was at the Station Inn in various configurations before this unit gelled as a group. And so I thought, kind of full circle moment to bring the guys back to the place. And, we've played there a few times, and always, no matter whether I'm sitting in with someone or I played with, as I said, with different people, there's something always very special about performing there because the sound is great. The people are right in front of you. It's very real. There's nothing artificial about that place. It's just, it appeals to me on a lot of levels. So I wanted to bring the guys back to where it all started. And that's what we did. Now, another motivation I had was I was about ready to go on a giant Hall & Oates tour.
Right.
2020 was earmarked for a 38 city Hall & Oates tour with Squeeze and KT Tunstall. And I thought, I'm probably not going to be playing with the guys for quite a while. And we had just been touring for almost 2 years behind the Arkansas album, and the band had gotten better. You know what it's like when you play live, things just keep getting better, and the arrangements evolved, and we added some songs, and the band was just shit hot. And I thought, I got to capture this now because we're not going to play together for a while. That was my motivation. Little did I know that the world would, come to a stop and. Here I was sitting on this really great recording, which I really didn't intend to release it at first. I thought, well, maybe someday, So I went in the studio and we mixed it, and it just sounded so darn good, and it's so real. There's nothing changed on this recording. I mean, we did not go in the studio and repair anything. It's exactly what you hear on the tape.
That's great.
the virtual tape
sure
is exactly what it is, what happened that night.
Yeah. You guys were going to make, you and Daryl were going to make a new record this year as well.
That was the plan. Yeah. We talked about it. And then in February, we started batting around some ideas, not together. I sent him some ideas. I had written a few things that I thought he might like, and he sent me a couple tracks that he had done with a guy from Holland, as a young producer. And so preliminary stages of that, and then of course the rug got pulled out from all of us, from under all of us. And so that's a work in progress on hold for who knows.
Right. But I guess the good news is we live in a time when you can continue to email ideas back and forth and get a lot of pre-production done that way.
I don't think Daryl really embraces that concept too much. He'd rather be in the room working on something physically. I, on the other hand, have taken it to a whole other level. The moment I realized that there was nothing happening, I began to dip my toe in the water of Zoom collaborations and playing virtual shows, playing live from my basement, doing a bunch of acoustic stuff. And it, the more at first I wasn't comfortable in that world, but the more I did it, the better it got. And then I started working with a lot of younger artists who were really savvy with Zoom recording. And we started coming up with some really good stuff. And that evolved into a movie project, which
Really?
I just did 4 songs for a new movie called Gringa, which is coming out, hopefully around the first of the year, or perhaps at the end of this year. And I collaborated with a hip hop artist in South Carolina. I did a duet with a young girl from Mexico City. It's got a lot of Spanish content in the movie. Another Zoom and collaboration with a good friend of mine named Daphne Willis, who used to live in Nashville. Now she lives in LA. And so it's been really cool. So I've really made the most of this period of time, done a lot of writing and a lot of producing and stuff like that.
Good for you. Yeah, I wasted no time either. This has arguably been the most productive year of my life.
You're home. I had more time on my hands than I ever planned on, and
Right.
I thought, let's try to take advantage of this.
Do you know my favorite thing that I learned about you from your book was that you're kind of a hippie. I fucking love that, man. I had no idea.
How explain to me how does one either have been or be a kind of a hippie?
Well, not well. I mean, you talk about experimenting with psychedelic drugs as a young person. You don't talk a lot about drugs necessarily in your book.
No.
A life of excess, though, for sure.
Well, luckily for me, I didn't live a life of excess. I certainly experimented, but definitely didn't fall into any of those traps.
Yeah, no, that's good for you. I am a sober guy now because of all those things.
Yeah.
But you talked about psychedelics, and you talked about the sweat lodges and the Native American spiritual studies, and all those things lend themselves to the generality of hippiness.
Of a kind of hippie, yeah.
I'm
not. Listen, man, I'm not goofing on you at all.
Yeah.
I'm actually agreeing with you, but I just think it's funny. Yeah.
I mean, I'm with you on all that stuff for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's been I'm a seeker in a way. I still do. I'm a bit of a a Taoist. I see the world that way, and I'm always I deal with meditation and things like that. So it's integrated into my life. It's not something that I found last week and found the latest guru of the week.
Right. I think that world people can definitely, especially people who are hardcore seeking because they really have a vacuum somewhere in their life, they can definitely fall prey to, fake gurus and whatnot, right?
Well, I remember that period of time in the 70s when these various gurus would kind of appear, and all our hippie friends. I remember in downtown Philadelphia in the little hippie enclave, they would all be talking about certain Baba Rum Raisin or whatever the hell the guy's name was, and they'd be like traipsing off to some place to worship and study with him. And I always thought that was bullshit. I was like, I mean, anybody that drives a gold-plated Rolls Royce,
Right.
I just can't get behind that kind of stuff.
I lived in
Well,
Washington when what was the guy out there? They just
Oh,
had
the one in Oregon.
yeah, it was
Yeah,
big news out there then. It was
Did you
like,
see that? Did you ever see the documentary?
yeah. I mean, I learned a lot of that. Was crazy, man.
Oh yeah, it's so crazy that it's almost hard to believe it actually happened.
And yet it did.
Yes, it did. It sure did. Yeah.
Yeah, it's insane.
My wife, who's considerably younger than me, she and I watched that documentary, and I told her about how I knew a lot of people who did that, took off and followed these. She said, "What was wrong with you people?" She totally couldn't relate. She comes from a different generation.
Right. My wife is 10 years younger than I am also, and we'll have at times like similar conversations, like where there's just not a connect. My dog is crying really loudly on the other side of this door. I'm gonna let him in because
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead. No problem.
less of a nuisance. Come here, you guys. You guys don't need to be crying. Also, I love that you talk about your relationship with your grandmother, and I connected with that a lot because although 23andMe has educated me to understand that maybe everything my family told me wasn't 100% true, my grandmother was definitely she grew up in New York. Came from an Italian family, and I was the first grandson.
Oh, yeah, perfect.
And I was, when you talked about how you were treated as a young kid, I immediately connected with that, and a lot of things made sense that I never even considered before. Hey, these guys are Big Mouse.
It's all right. No, you understand. You understand. It's like being the golden child.
Right. What I'm wondering is that, do you think that being treated that way, as opposed to maybe any other number of ways you could have been treated as a child, like not being encouraged to perform, or do you think that it lent itself to your comfortability in the situations that you would face throughout your life, where you maybe felt like, no, I belong here. Like I deserve the first meatball, of course. Why wouldn't I?
Deserve the first meatball of life, so to speak, a metaphor for
yeah, man. What do you want to
I like your dog. Is that a dachshund?
Well, he's a dachshund, miniature dachshund, and Jack Russell mix. So he's a big mouth.
Boy. So he's got a lot of energy.
Yeah, his name is Mr. Big.
Oh, okay.
And because,
Yeah, because he is. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, no, I mean, you're right. I think that being the first son, having that kind of attention, I think it does provide a self-confidence. It's an inner self-confidence that you feel like you do. You feel like you kind of deserve the first meatball. I mean, the way you put it was very, really on the money. Also, my mother was a stage mother. She lived vicariously through me and my talent. And she didn't really have hobbies, and she didn't, she was a 50s mom, wife and mother, and she worked, but she, so it was a real source of pride and satisfaction that I could perform and sing. And when I was very young, she would take me around to these talent shows and things like that. Did you hear the bit about when I played at the mental institution?
Yeah, no, it was great.
Okay.
I was just like, wow.
I couldn't even really describe it the way I really should have, because it was so horrendous and scary.
Right.
But anyway, that's just an aside.
And you were young, right?
Oh, I started singing when I was, as soon as I could talk,
Right.
4 or 5 years old. Yeah.
That's incredible. I love that. It seems like you knew what you wanted to do.
I didn't know if I knew, but I never questioned it. Let's put it that way.
Right.
It wasn't like conscious, like I'm going to be a musician. I just was. And I never thought about it any other way.
Right. I think that, you know, had life treated you differently, you would be playing music still. I think there are a lot of folks out there who are, someone once told me being good at music is, you know, almost inconsequential. Like it's not a guarantee, you know.
Daryl and I are both identical in that regard. We were both somehow or another, and I don't want to sound too, you know, overblown or hippy dippy on it, but we were born to be musicians in some way, shape, or form. And over the years, you know, and I think this is a thing that people don't really understand about Hall & Oates, our relationship and our success and things. Most of the things that we did and the important decisions that we had to make along the way, whether they be business or music or artistic, were always predicated on what will allow us to keep doing what we're doing. Not how much money can we make, how can we get another hit record, or can we have a number one record or sell a million copies. They were not the questions we asked. We asked, what can we do that will propel this thing that we've got forward? And if it were to fail, and if everything went, you know, crapped out, could we do to keep doing what we were doing? I mean, if I was teaching guitar lessons now, that's what I'd be doing, you know? So yeah, you're right about that. And it was something that was, you know, kind of predestined, I guess, for both of us as our life avocation, but it was also something that we worked at.
Yeah. It's very clear that you guys worked your asses off.
Yeah.
And I think that you guys have a well-deserved place in the Rock Hall. I think the Rock Hall is a funny thing.
Yes,
right?
It is. Yep.
It seems like a strange thing to have a Hall of Fame for, you know?
You know, it's like getting invited to join a country club. Of course, I've never been invited to join a country club, so how would I know? But if I was invited to join an exclusive country club, I would think it would be a lot like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Well, I was never invited to George Harrison's house, so I think
that was just a stroke of luck from my good friendship with the great Sir Jackie Stewart, the race driver, and his family. George, they were very close with George, and through them, I met George, and we bonded over. There was no musical bonding with George Harrison. It was really all about race cars. And then eventually, you know, he did play on our, I don't know if you're aware or not, but he played on our Along the Red Ledge album, 1978.
I did not know that.
Yeah, he was living in LA. We were recording in LA, and we had a lot of guests on that album, all sorts of various players on that album. And we were recording in LA, and I was hanging out with George, and George asked if me and Daryl would want to come over to screen the new Ruddles movie that he had produced.
Oh yeah.
When he produced the Ruddles movie, which, by the way, he mortgaged his house to do that movie. And he was really proud of it. And we're like, yeah, shit, we're getting invited to George Harrison's house to see a movie. Why not? Right. So we went to this amazing house that he had in Beverly Hills. It was, I wish I could remember where it was, because it was so amazing. It was like, it was in the woods, but it was in Beverly Hills.
There's
and it overlooked
so
this like reservoir.
Cool things tucked away.
Yeah, and I to this day I couldn't tell you where it was. I'm sure someone knows. But anyway, we went there and we watched the Ruddles movie, and all through the movie he kept stopping the movie and going, "Yeah, and this is where we said, or I said to Eric Idle, we should try the, and he was just so proud of it, and it was really cool. And then we said, "Hey George, we're recording an album. Would you like to play on it?" And he went, "Oh yeah." He goes, "But I just want to be in the band. I just want to be in the band." No, no special and we said, sure, whatever you want, just come on down and play. So he came down and he played acoustic guitar. That's all he did. But he loved it. He wanted to be in the rhythm section, playing acoustic guitar, didn't want to do any solos or anything like that.
And it was was it cut live kind of situation? Or
Oh yeah, we always cut live. I still cut live to this day. Yeah.
Another thing that occurred to me while listening to the audiobook, I bought it twice because I knew that I wasn't going to have time to read the book before I spoke to you, and I thought, you know what, I need to read this damn book before I speak to John, and then so I got the audiobook. But I bought the digital book. So
thank you. That's another 15 cents. I appreciate that.
There you go.
Yeah.
You know what? It's screws in the hinge of the door of the new outbuilding.
Right. Yep. Hey, you know what? That's funny you should say that. There was a period of time in the 90s when we weren't working very much, and I was not, things had not gone that well, but I was building a house in Colorado, and I remember being on stage and thinking, okay, this is a driveway. This is like a driveway. Right. This could be the windows.
Right.
This could be the windows. I honestly went through a few years when every time I do a show, that was actually what I was thinking about.
That's amazing. I was thinking to myself, the early part of your career was all through the time when celebrity and success and being, famous, being famous was still relatively anonymous, right? And
yeah,
you could write an autobiography or a memoir. And I wondered to myself, and I wonder what you think about this. People have diarrhea of the look at me now, and they spill their guts on social media. And I wonder if in 10 years, the artists that will be seasoned at that time, if they'll be at a point where they could write a book, will they have anything to say?
You mean because of the fact that they might have already put it all out there for the world?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's I never thought of that. It's an interesting idea. It's an interesting thought because it's true. Their lives are exposed, and it seems like they're compelled to do it as well.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, then again, who is going to have a career that's going to be long enough to warrant telling their life story?
Man, you ain't kidding.
You never know.
You ain't kidding.
Someone will, but it'll be few and far between, I have a feeling.
I love that you guys have embraced, through your career, you embraced technology, but you also, I guess technology has changed a lot over the last 50 years. Incredibly.
Well, we started recording with the 2-track tape in the 60s. Went through the 4-track, 8-track, 16-track, 24 tracks, linked machines through into the digital era, and right from organic instruments to the earliest primitive monophonic synthesizers and on to the polyphonic sampling synthesizers. And so, our career in a way really does parallel a lot of the technology of recording. I mean, sure, we don't go back as far as Les Paul, but that being said, our first albums were engineered by Gene Paul, Les Paul's son,
right,
at the Atlantic Studios. And I remember our first album was mixed on Tom Dowd's mixing desk with the big Bakelite rotating knobs.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's pretty hardcore primitive recording stuff.
Did you ever go see Les at any of his weekly gigs in the city?
No, I missed him before he passed away. And shortly after he passed away, I played with the Les Paul Trio at the club.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, every time I was in New York, I would tell myself, I'm gonna go.
Yeah, you'll see him next time.
I'll see him next time I'm here. And then and then you don't have the opportunity.
I know. When I played there with the Les Paul Trio, his son was there, and one of his other sons, and he gave me two handmade picks. Les had a hobby of making picks at the kitchen table.
Really?
He would take plastic and he would shape them into different shapes and different gauges and different things. And he gave me two handmade picks that Les had made, and he gave them to me as a gift.
You still have them?
Yeah.
That's incredible. I love that. You have an automotive themed shirt on.
Yes.
I notice. And are you?
Well,
You're all done racing, yeah?
oh yeah, I'm done racing, but I'm not done driving.
Right. Yeah. You know, perhaps I imagined this, but I've been to Nashville a couple times and
Yep.
driving around.
Mhm.
NASCAR is big down there. And that's a whole other brand of racing, right?
Yeah, I'm a fan. I followed NASCAR. I knew a lot of the people, especially back in the '80s. It's not my thing. But I've always loved motor racing. I like all sorts of motor racing, and I'll follow everything. I'm, a bit of a geek when it comes to that. I'll watch it on TV, and I follow Formula One very closely. I follow IMSA, which is the endurance sports car racing stuff. Yeah.
The thing that I noticed about drivers, but like general driving in the South and in Tennessee in particular, is that people drive like they're race car drivers every damn where people are passing on the shoulder. Perhaps it was just a crazy week while I was there, but is that a thing?
The driving down here is definitely a unique experience. The concept of turn signals is not really hasn't quite been adopted by the general population.
Do you think that's NASCAR's influence?
I don't know what it is. There's first of all, and this is not a slag on Tennessee in any way, shape, or form. But whoever designed the highway system down here, I have no idea why they let him have a pencil and the ability to.
Is it two big rings around the city?
You've got exit ramps where people have to cross from the left all the way to the right to get there. Yeah. Then you have people entering the highways from different angles. It's the most convoluted thing. They're actually slowly fixing all that. They're like, as they fix the highways, but you add all these new people moving to Nashville because Nashville's growing like you can't believe.
Right.
So you have all these people moving to Nashville. No one knows their way around. And then you put them all on that highway where everyone's going like this.
Well, they're barely looking at the road.
No, it's you take your life in your hands.
They have their Google Maps open on their phone.
Or whatever. Yeah, or they're texting and they're doing all that good stuff.
Right.
I kind of find it interesting. I think it's a challenge. I use it to keep sharp.
Do you think that it's kind of like taking your roller skates off after and walking or walking out of a Rocky movie and you're like, yeah, I could totally whoop some ass, and then but it's people like watching NASCAR and they're like, no,
you never know. It could be the barbecue, it could be any number of things
for the bathroom. The other thing that I know about that place, my experiences are pretty limited. Although I did have the opportunity to play at the Ryman, which was a huge.
What? That's a bucket list thing. That's and I hopefully you can relate to what I'm going to say about this.
I hope so too.
The Ryman is obviously a magical place, and it's one of those places that you must play if you're a performer. To play there is a bucket list thing. Here's what blew my mind about the Ryman the first time, and I noticed it the very first time that I played there. When I walked, when you go on stage and whether you're playing with a band or you're playing by yourself, you have your monitors, whether they're in-ear monitors or wedges, whatever. And that's your sonic world, that's your world. That's what you hear. That's what you're listening to. That's what it's your musical frame of reference. What's happening out to the audience is you're counting on the sound man to hopefully deliver something that sounds good to the audience.
Wood, yeah.
But at the Ryman, what you hear while you're standing there is what you hear in the room. It's all one thing. I've never experienced that on any other venue in my life. It sounds like even though there are monitors and even though there's a PA system, they all seem to be the same. It's just one thing. It's a hard thing to describe unless you're a performer and you're used to playing on stage. I don't think the average person can relate to it. But you being a musician, as soon as I walked off the stage, I went, wow, there was no separation between the stage and the audience, the house. It was very unique, an amazing experience.
Well, it's an interesting room, right? It's the stage isn't particularly high, and the rise of the seats also isn't very high. Like,
yeah,
when
you have that balcony that's low as well.
Yeah, you barely look up to the balcony.
Right.
Which is interesting.
It was designed as a gospel choir for gospel choirs.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I had one of the worst gigs of my life that night.
Why, you played too loud?
No, man. The singer in this band, he ran a stereo guitar rig, like a real janky stereo guitar rig, and he was having problems. And instead of just doing what a cool-headed person would do and just foregoing the 2 amps and using one, he sat up there and fussed with his crap for like 10 minutes, leaving people waiting. And then it got in his head, and we had a bit of a rough show. And this was like, their infant years of email. We got a nasty email from one of the concert attendees talking about how we were the worst band she'd ever seen live. And so every year I'm sure to share that with folks.
Let's say, at least you made your mark in some weird ass way.
That's right. She'll never forget us.
That's right.
That's important for us. That's worth something. How has being in Nashville affected? This is where I was headed before I started talking about myself. How has being in Nashville affected your playing? Because you've been surrounded by the best players for years, but Nashville to me feels like its own universe. It's almost like the best musicians in New York are they're different. The best musicians in Nashville don't even need to hear the song. They need to know the key, and they can almost just 1-2 skidoo, and here we go. You play a flawless show.
Yeah, the bar is set extremely high in terms of musicianship. It's something that I realized early on. I came to Nashville in the late '90s to try to write some songs, and wasn't that successful. But it really appealed to me that there was this tight music community. And once I started going into the recording studio, even to do some demos, I realized that even the demo players were playing at a really high level. And the only people that I played with for 20 years was Daryl and our various Hall & Oates bands. So, I had a very, very, very kind of distinct role as mostly rhythm guitar player in the band, singing, playing rhythm guitar, so it was like something that I could do in my sleep, and, not that I would do it in my sleep, but I could. And there was not a lot of musical challenging, the moments of challenging, myself. I had kind of slid along and kind of glided along. When I first came to Nashville in the early 2000s to really do my first solo album, I did some sessions with Sam Bush, Jerry Douglas, Bela Fleck, and some various other people. And the first thing I knew immediately was that the bar was way up here. And
you're certainly in a room full of some players.
Yeah, how about it? And I said, holy crap. I said, you know what? I said, I better get off my ass and start practicing, because I could, of course, being the songwriter and playing the part that I wrote the song, it was pretty easy to just, because, it was my part. So I played it. But once I heard what they were doing and the type of things they were doing and the accompaniment and also what really struck me immediately was how well they listened. How not only did they listen to my song and me and what I was, and to help me bring out what I was trying to do, but they were listening to each other. And it was a whole other level of accompaniment that that really, really was very powerful for me to appreciate and understand. And from that moment on, I started woodshedding a lot, and my playing level has gone way, way up because of that, because of being. I didn't want to be the guy who gets invited to the party because of his name, but you can't hang at the party because you can't hang at the party. You know what I mean? So yeah, it was a wake up call, and it was one of the best things that happened to me. You know, I just continued to work hard and continued to test myself and challenge myself and surround myself with amazing musicians who you know, could bring me along.
When you were woodshedding, were there particular points that you were focused on? Like where you're like, I'm gonna work on Travis. I'm gonna work the shit out of my
Well,
Travis
what I
picking, or
what it wasn't so much that I practiced like to place, because I could do, you know, I had a lot of versatility. The one thing about my, you know, I'm not the greatest, you know, soloist, and I'm not the greatest rhythm guitar player. I'm not the greatest anything, to be honest with you, but I'm very versatile. And I can play folk music, bluegrass music, Delta blues, swing, ragtime, jazz, bossa nova, pop. I can do all those things. And so what I decided to do was compartmentalize and grab all these various things that I could do, but not do any of them really well, but I could do them all. And I started to hone in on things. And just I realized that there was an elements of my influences, the folk and the blues and the organic side of my influences, which had gotten kind of pushed to the side during the pop, you know, the pop juggernaut of Hall and Oates, but never really left. And by being around these great Americana and roots musicians, I started to rediscover that in myself. So I went back to Doc Watson. I went back to Mississippi John Hurt. I went back to Lightning Hopkins. I went back to Joe Beam. I went back to Curtis Mayfield. I went back to all the touchstones of my, especially in my guitar, you know, influences, and I began to hone those. You know, people always say, "Well, how, you know, what's your style?" I said, "Well, if you take Chuck Berry, Doc Watson, Mississippi John Hurt, and Curtis Mayfield, and you put them all together, I play like that, except not as good." That's the only way I can describe it.
well, not a single one of those guys could probably play like the other folks that you named.
Right, but I guess that's where I actually have I've made my mark. I can play like all of them, but not very well.
I think that is absolutely wonderful.
You know, it's a thing that I enjoy doing, and I've also tested myself to push myself harder on the theory side and the you know what's really missing is
Tell me.
chords.
You bet.
Chord changes are really
Yeah,
missing
man.
because the movement in pop music has gone completely away from the harmonic side of the band, and it's focused 100% on the rhythmic side of the band. And it's kind of a lost art, and it's something when I play with the guys in Nashville, it's something they always comment on. They always go, "Man, you got the coolest chords," because people just don't do that. And they always say, "Well, you play guitar like a piano player." And I say, "Well, there's a reason for that too. It's because when I was getting together with Daryl, he had a very unique and a very, you know, highly developed piano chordal style, where he would have a lot of superimposed bass notes and you know, different voicings, which I had to figure out ways of emulating on the guitar neck.
Right.
And it gave me a more of a piano style of a guitar, of my guitar style is more akin to the way a piano player plays than the average kind of guitar player plays. So that people always seem to comment on that. And, you know, it makes perfect sense because I, for so many years, playing along with him and trying to, you know, come up with complementary things for what he was doing on the piano.
I think that you mentioned that you were into all the Stax catalog.
Yeah.
And I love the
Cropper.
I love it. Oh my
Well,
goodness.
I'm friends with Cropper, and you know, he he's a trip, man. He's an icon, and you know, I remember I asked him to play on a track when I first came to Nashville, and he came down to play on the track, and he started playing all this stuff, and I was like, I'm thinking in my head, why isn't he playing like Steve Cropper? But I didn't want to say that to him. And eventually, you know, I guess he was experimenting and trying to come up with stuff. And eventually something must have clicked because he all of a sudden he started going, jack, jack, jack. And I was like, there you go.
There it is.
It's pretty cool.
Maybe he's just trying to scare you.
Yeah, I think he was just trying to do something different, which, hey, you know, that's what we all try to
You
do.
can't fault anyone for that.
No.
When you went out to Colorado and were focused on building your house and ranching, essentially,
Yeah.
and I mean the speed at which your life was moving slowed down drastically. The work increased, I imagine.
Well, the work, you mean the physical work?
The physical, yeah, you weren't working like that.
Well, my wife, you know, I met my wife when she was a young girl. She was come from a farming family in Illinois, and she grew up on a farm. So when we got together, she in a way led me down that road. She wanted to replicate her childhood in a sense, and have all these exotic animals, and you know, have a place where she could plant stuff, and she could be outside, and you know, do that sort of thing. And I had never lived on a farm in my life. You know, I grew up in the country in Pennsylvania, but I lived in the city for most of my life. So I just went along for the ride. And in you know, it was funny. There was a guy I knew that lived on the road with us, and he used to laugh and call me Farmer John because he'd see me out there, you know, trying to fix a fence, and I had no clue how to do it. So I've got all these crazy stories of my introduction to farming and ranching, and it was an unbelievable experience for me, you know. And you know, I bought a tractor, and I, you know, learned how to do all this stuff. And
Did
to
you
this
work
day,
on
I
your
still have
tractor?
that
Did you like?
a John Deere.
Did you
I,
work
I
on
still
it
I still have it.
mechanically?
Yeah, I still have it. Yeah, and it's one of the best things that I ever bought. I mean, honestly,
Right.
I've had it for 25 years now, and it's one of those things where it's like I could be away for 6 months. I go into the barn, crank the thing up, and it starts. And I go, "Damn, this is good. This is a
That's a
good
good
machine right here."
machine. Yeah.
Yeah, so it is an amazing experience for me to check out of that world and live with mountain people who didn't care about my musical, you know, thing. It was all about, can you hang? Can you climb? You know, can you get on the mountain bike and make it up this hill?
Right.
Can you ski off this? Can you jump off this cliff? You know, into the deep powder, and it was a fantastic world that I entered, and still some of my best friends, you know, are part of that. And I've left it behind in a way, but I've never really left it behind.
What I wonder is, when you were playing, were you picking on a guitar occasionally through this
Hardly ever.
period? Hardly
I
ever.
don't think I played music from. I mean, very, you know, Daryl and I would go out on tour very rarely through the early 90s.
Right.
Only here and there we do some corporate shows, or we play a casino, or it was just he was living in London for the most part. I had moved to Colorado. I wasn't interested in doing anything. I was burned out. I mean, you know, from 1972 until 1986, I made a record and toured, and made a record and toured every year straight without ever stopping.
Right.
And it was time for me to live a life of a different life, you know, get married, build a house, have a kid, you know, hike in the mountains. That's where I wanted to be. That's where I needed to be. And it really saved my life in so many ways.
I believe that. How do you think that time affected your approach to music? Because certainly that sort of departure from your focus on music for so long, stepping
Well,
away and then returning to it.
as the 90s went on, I started getting the itch to make some music. I had met some people, some guys in Colorado who a few of the guys had come from New York and they had a band. They would ask me to sit in, and little by little, they kind of sucked me into their little band world, which was great because those guys, I played with them a lot in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so it was really and all of a sudden I started, kind of dipping my toe back in the musical waters. And that's when I made my first solo album, based on that experience. So it was good to step away from it because I came back. And I think when I came back to music, I realized it wasn't the only thing in my life. It was just one thing that I had a much more, much better perspective on where it sat in the scheme of my life.
Right. It's funny what we will put importance, what we'll place importance on in our lives.
Sure.
When it's right in our faces.
Hey, there's always a different time. You've got to you just got to be aware of the ebbs and flows and the way life takes you and the things that are, and you kind of you have your master plan, but it doesn't always work out that way.
If your life was, I don't know if this is going to fall flat. I don't even know how I'm going to say it yet. If your life was a racetrack, I guess, do you suppose at that period of time you were taking a corner?
No, I think what I wanted to get off the racetrack.
Sure.
I wanted to sit on the hillside above the racetrack and watch the race cars going around, during that period of time. If what you're alluding to is that the cars on the racetrack were music and the music business, and I think I wanted to step out, and then eventually I kind of eased my way back in, but with a much different approach.
Yeah. I never flew a plane. I've been up in a couple of Cessnas before,
Mm-hmm.
My grandfather flew. Do you still fly?
Once you're a pilot, you're always a pilot. You have they can never take your license away.
Is that right?
Yeah, but you're not legal to fly unless you get recertified. Right. So I'm a lapsed pilot. I'm an uncertified pilot. I can get in the right seat, which is the co-pilot seat of an airplane, and fly it. There's no problem at all. But I wouldn't take the responsibility of flight planning and getting in there and flying on my own somewhere because I'm totally out of the loop. But with a professional pilot, I do that all the time. Actually, I go up with friends who either have planes or even some of the charters that I've flown over the years. They'll say, because once they find out you're a pilot, they always go, "Come on up," and then they know within a couple minutes you either know what you're doing or you don't. So it's like you can't really screw up that badly.
It's kind of like being at a jam at the station inn.
Right. Yeah.
So that, I guess that took the place of racing after you had your accident, yeah?
Yeah, it did. What happened was we were on charter flights a lot during that period of time. And I would always sit on the jump seat right up next to the pilots. And I was fascinated with what they were doing and everything. And I kept asking these questions. And I had this the chief pilot was a guy from Long Island. He was, he's typical like New York, Long Island guy.
Sure.
And, finally he just got tired of me asking all these questions. And I got on the plane one day and he handed me two books. One was called Stick and Rudder, which was written like in the 1930s. It's like the classic pilot's primer,
Right.
It's written by like Klaus von something, some German guy, right? And it's one of those things of the original principles of flying. And he handed me that in another book and he said, "Here, read these. And if you want to know more, then we'll talk later." So I read the books and I said, "Could I learn how to fly?" He goes, "Yeah." He goes, "I'll teach you." I said, "Okay." So as soon as the tour was over, he lived on Long Island. I lived in Connecticut, and I had ordered a car. I had ordered a car in Europe in 1983, and the car was delivered to a Porsche dealer in Rochester, New York. Now, why, I have no idea, because I live near New York City, and I guess they say, oh, it's New York, so we'll just send it to some dealer in New York.
Right.
Little did they know it was 3 hours away from where I live. So the pilot flew up to Danbury, where I was living, in a little Cessna, and I said, hey, can we fly and pick up my car in Rochester? And he was like, yeah, sure. He goes, this will be your first lesson. So we get in the plane in Danbury. I had never been in a little light plane before. And he sat me in the pilot seat. He said, okay, let's go. I said, well, what do I do? He goes, I'll talk you through it. So I'm taxiing with the rudders, and he's got his feet on the rudders, and he's helping me, and I'm getting the hang of it. And we get to the end of the runway, and we do the run up. He shows me how to do it, and you turn the mags on and off, and you get the thing going. And we got out on the runway, and he goes, and he had his hand on the throttle, and he had his hand on the yoke, and I had my hand. And he goes, here we go. And he firewalled it, and plane started moving, and he's helping me. He's using the pedals, and all of a sudden, whoop, we're up in the air, and I'm flying. And he goes, okay, keep it, and I'm like, okay, I'm freaking flying an airplane. Okay.
That's gotta be...
So we fly to Rochester, New York, and I get out, and I landed the plane with him. Of course, he was, with me, and doing a lot of it. And I get out of the plane, and I go pick up my car and drive back to New York City. And he flew back, and I said, oh, this is great. I said, can we keep doing lessons? He said, yes. So he kept flying up to Danbury, and we would fly around. We'd go over Long Island Sound, and we'd land at some small airports, and little by little. And then I had 10 hours, and we were flying one day. It was a beautiful day. We were up in Connecticut, and we landed at this little airport, and he got out. He got out of the plane, and I said, where are you going? He goes, take off, do three landings, and come back and pick me up.
Really?
And I was like, okay, really? He said, yeah, go ahead. And he walked away. And so I went out to the end of the runway. I took off, and I could hear him talking.
Just
everything,
like
every second I could hear everything he was saying, even though he wasn't there. It was like ingrained in my head. And I made 3 landings, and I came to a stop. And he came back, and he goes, you just soloed. That was it. And I was on my way.
Were you scared shitless, or at that point were you confident?
Yeah. I was confident enough. I was scared, but I wasn't so scared that I was debilitated.
Right.
And I was totally in control of what I was doing. And from that point on, I said, well, I'm not going to fly these other people's planes, because there were all these rental planes that he was using.
Right.
So I bought a plane, a small plane, a really nice one, but a small one. And he signed me off to solo from Danbury to Islip, Long Island, where he lived. So I would get in the plane. The only place I was allowed to fly was from Danbury to Islip. But that's over Long Island Sound.
Yeah.
And I would get in my plane, and I would take off, and I would fly over Long Island Sound. I'd land in Islip. He'd get in the plane, and we'd go and do lessons. And we did it at night, and we did it all. We flew to Nantucket and Cape Cod, and we flew to Vermont, New Hampshire. And, I started building up my hours, and then I took my test, and I passed. And then I got my instrument rating, and I passed. And then I bought a really nice plane and started flying around.
The first time you made the trip across the water over to Long Island, were you solo then?
Well, I had done it with him prior to that.
Got it.
And there was it was all, it's all very procedural. He was like, he said, look, we're going to cross the water. So what are we going to do? He said, what's the glide ratio of your plane? And of course I knew what it was. It was like 15-1, for every, you drop a foot for every 15 feet, and you calculate it. So he goes, so what altitude do you want to cross the water? He said, you want to cross the water so when you're in the middle of the water, at the longest distance from either shore, you can glide to either shore. So just figure that out. Right. And that's the way you're going to cross the water. You can go higher, but you can't go lower. Right. So, it was just these procedural things that appealed to me. And I got into that, and then I, started doing it. And did you read the story about when I picked up icing over Lake Erie?
I got that.
That's was
scary.
I still have nightmares about that.
Honestly, man.
I have chills on my arms when I just said those words.
I mean, you weren't alone also. I mean,
No,
like
I was
that,
with my
that,
wife.
that,
I
that,
was with my wife, but she luckily she was sleeping. She didn't realize actually what was happening.
that adds a whole other level of terrifying responsibility, you know.
I'll tell you a really great story. This is a funny story which I didn't put in the book.
Let's
When I
have
first
it.
when I first got my instrument rating, I wanted to fly instruments a lot because, once you get your rating, the more you do it, the more confident you are, because it's one thing to get the rating. It's another thing to actually be in the clouds and doing it for real, where you're just flying on the gauges, right? So we were going to Martha's Vineyard,
Mhm.
and my wife and I lived in Connecticut at the time. We were going to Martha's Vineyard. So we put the dog in the plane, got in the plane, and it was a beautiful, crystal clear day. And, here again, procedurally, what do you do if you're going to fly to Martha's Vineyard and you live in Connecticut? Well, you go up the Connecticut shoreline, stay over the land because there's lots of little airports along the way. So something happens, and you pick the shortest distance over the water. And when you find that, then you get to an altitude where you could glide and you go over the water. And that's kind of a safe way of doing things. All right, so that's all sounded good. So I filed a flight plan, and I'm flying on instruments, even though it was a crystal clear day. I didn't need to, but I wanted to practice. And I get to the point over Rhode Island where I'm going to cut across to Martha's Vineyard. So I cut across, and as I'm going across the water to Martha's Vineyard, I look out ahead of me, and Martha's Vineyard is completely gray. There is not, you can't see a thing. And I'm thinking, oh, okay, now I'm actually going to fly instruments for real. So I'm thinking, okay, this is the real thing now. So we get it, we enter the clouds, it's completely socked in, and we're getting bumped around. We're in a little plane, we're getting bumped around, and I'm in the controller's giving me headings and altitudes, and I'm flying on the instruments. And my dog comes up to the front of the plane and pukes this projectile vomit onto the gauges and the whole console of the plane, my hand on the throttle. And so I'm telling my wife, get him out of here. And he's got his head stuck in there. And so now I'm in the clouds, got puke all over the plane, and I'm trying to find, and eventually I land. And our big weekend, which we were going to socialize and go, hang out with some friends, I spent the entire weekend cleaning puke out of the crevices and nooks and crannies of the airplane, inside the gauges. It was horrible. So that was my first experience.
Was the puke obscuring any of the gauges when it happened?
No, but it was distracting.
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah,
you bet. Danbury is it close to the New York border?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I work for some folks in Millerton.
Yeah. Millerton's not that far.
That must be close, right? Did you know the Harney Tea Company? Did you know them?
The what?
Harney and Sons. Did you know them?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
It's
a tea company. Maybe I'll send you some tea.
Yeah.
You're a hippie. I'll send you some CBD tea.
Okay, good. Sounds good. You're a hippie. Send you some CBD. That's good. Yeah, my wife's bringing me some CBD back from Colorado for my back.
Oh, they got all kinds of stuff out there.
Oh, yeah.
I heard that they were going to legalize mushrooms.
Hey, why not? My friend, my next door neighbor out there is the sheriff, and I always said to him, I said, hey, ever since the pot legalized, I said, anything? What's going on? He goes, there's no problem. He goes, people get stoned. They just want to stay home and eat ice cream and watch movies. He goes, it's still the drunk drivers we got to deal with.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I hate to tell you this, but I got to roll. This is a great conversation, but
yeah, it's okay.
Is anyone going to actually listen to us for an hour?
Absolutely. I have like 3-hour conversations, and
well, I can see why, because you're a really good interviewer and you're very, very casual and makes it real easy. But unfortunately, I got to do another one. So,
well, I'm very excited to hear your live record.
Thank you.
I'm so happy that you gave me some time.
Oh yeah, this has been a great conversation.
Chance to talk to you, and I think you're one of the greatest. And,
thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you for years of incredible music.
Well, please give Tom and Roxanne and everybody the heads up on this so we can post it and get
Awesome.
people over to your site.
It'll go up next Monday. I post
Okay.
on Mondays and Wednesdays. So
All right,
next
but you'll
Monday-
let Tom and those guys know, right?
Absolutely.
That'd be fantastic.
And I'll see
Well,
you in
that's great, man.
Saratoga Springs next August.
What's that? Saratoga Springs?
Yeah. That's
Yeah, you
not
know,
so far at all.
we would have been doing that just 2 weeks ago, right? Something like
Yeah,
that.
man.
Yeah. Oh well, we'll see what happens.
Well, thanks again. Congratulations, and
Thanks, man.
we'll talk to you soon.
All right, well, stay safe, and it was fun. It was a fun conversation. Next time, I'll put up a different background.
Yeah, well, you can show. Yeah, who knows?
All right,
All right, see ya.
take care, man. Bye.